Welcome to the Ben Buzz. I'm Benny King, and this is Hawkeye State of Mind. Now, I've really been looking forward to doing this, and I haven't really done like an outside segment outside of my main show, and this is what I've been kind of building up towards, especially with Iowa and everything that I'm a big fan, and I've said that on previous episodes. So this segment, sort of inside of the original show, there's still going to be regular Ben Buzz episodes, but this one going to be purely focusing on not just Iowa football, but basketball. We'll see what all sports we get into, but that's really what this podcast adjacent. So this segment is what it's going to be about. So, I mean, I'm really, really excited for the game tomorrow. We're going to have Iowa going on the road at number 22 Iowa State. Now, Iowa State is a really good team, and Matt Campbell is certainly a great head coach. It's going to be an interesting duel, especially at head coach, because Matt Campbell, he had chances to leave, to go to bigger colleges, but he stayed at Iowa State, and that is his program. Like, they trust him because, I mean, he could have left, and he stayed and got a bigger contract when he could have got it at different schools, and that loyalty has certainly resonated with the rest of the team, where you look at a guy like quarterback Rocco Becht has been there for multiple years now. Now, on the other side, you got Kirk Ferentz, and Kirk Ferentz has been there for decades. He's one of the longest tenured head coaches, 205 career wins. You heard that right. Kirk Ferentz is ridiculous, and even though Iowa's not always so flashy with their win records, they usually get about 8-ish games. There's been a couple times since 2000 where they've had like 4 or 6 or, some variation of that, but there's been a lot of 10-win seasons and a lot of 8-win seasons, and I think just the fact that they've had that sort of consistency is really surprising, especially when a lot of years you're like, the offense isn't that great, and they still do about the same. So it really is interesting, and this game is certainly a huge rivalry. The Cy-Hawk Trophy is on the line in Ames. Now, Iowa leads the series all-time 48-30, but that doesn't tell the whole story, obviously. Both teams play close just about every time they play. There's always something fluky that happens where a while ago, Iowa barely edged out a win in 2019, and it was the randomest thing where Iowa punted, and it bounced off an Iowa State guy's back right in front of the return man, and Iowa recovered to win the game. Like, just random fluky stuff like that. It feels like that it kind of happens every year. And even though the overall record is kind of lopsided, 48-30, but when you start looking into it, since 2000s, it's pretty on par with that as well. But when you look at this decade, since Iowa State won in 2022, it's been very interesting. Ohio State won on the road in 2022, and then they lost at home, and then they won on the road. So they've kind of gone back and forth like that, and Iowa and Iowa State just kind of trading wins this decade especially. And Iowa State, it's the last 6 times they've played at home against this Iowa team, they've lost. Now, obviously, this is a different team, a lot of new players, but when we're talking about the last year or so or the year before, a lot of returning players, and obviously that defense, there's tons of guys that even though a lot of them left to the NFL, just the way Iowa is able to establish talent, and especially how they're able to develop talent, is always so impressive. And you look at so many NFL guys, and primarily, I mean, they call it tight end university for a reason. Sam Laporta, George Kittle, TJ Hawkinson, Noah Fant. And, you could even keep going on just because that's kind of how Iowa is. And we've, especially this century, or the past 10 years has been great because, all those guys were in dang near consecutive draft classes where it's really surprising. And especially on the defensive side of the ball as well, where you get guys like EJ Epinesa, who's been doing great for the Bills, and guys like Josie Jewell, Desmond King, Josh Jackson. And even though a lot of these guys, maybe they don't end up panning out at the next level, but what they did for Iowa is so crazy. And Iowa just kind of continues to do this every year, where their defense is so stellar, and their offense, outside of a few years where you got to go back a bit, where Nate Stanley was pretty good on this Iowa team. And, of course, you had TJ Hawkins and Noah Fant, which at the time were the top 2 tight ends in the nation. And Amir Smith-Marset, wide receiver there. And I believe that was Akram Wadley as well at running back. That team was very very talented on the offensive side of the ball. And then the defense is always so in check, where it's like the past couple of years, especially where we're like waiting, where we're like Petras, McNamara, we're like, it's kind of like a QB carousel where we're kind of waiting for something like that to break out, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And even though Brian Ferentz, I get it, and it was his son, and I get why you don't want to fire him, and just everything that goes into that, eventually they did have to do it, though, and they brought in Tim Lester, and the offense did improve. Especially when you look at the numbers, it did improve. As far as on the field, it feels very similar to past Iowa teams, but it's definitely an improvement. Like points per game's up, stats are up, that type of stuff. And it's great that we're seeing that, but we just hope that they don't stop now, or they don't just continue to run the ball, or they don't just continue to focus on defense. Hope to look at that and not be satisfied with it and just say we can keep making this better and better. And that's what I think they will do. And that's what I was hoping they were going to do week one. Because if you watch week one, it was actually kind of ugly, especially for the first half against an FCS opponent in Albany. Not only do you think you'd be putting them away, but you'd also think you'd be more experimental with your play style just to try and test things out, see what's working, what's not, because we know the defense is going to be good, and it was, right? Albany scored one touchdown on one drive. They didn't get anything else. So we knew the offense was going to be good, and Iowa is always able to have a great running back tandem, especially because their line has usually been great, and they've always been great at running the football, right? So we already knew that going in, that Iowa could run, that they could play defense. So it was like, and against a team where it's only meaningless if you win, obviously, but against a game that's essentially meaningless because, it's not going to do anything for you if you win. It'll definitely hurt you if you lose, but as long as you win, it'll be fine. So why don't you mess around a little bit? Mix it up. Maybe test out you don't want to put a lot of stuff on tape, but just kind of see what you can do. Right? And especially with throwing the ball. So I was very surprised that Iowa did not really throw it that much. And I understand that Iowa is great running the ball, but we knew that already. And they had to have known that already, unless they just wanted to really get ahead of it and really figure out which running backs are the top guys, because they are having to replace Caleb Johnson. So I do get that. But you don't have to run on every down to figure out who's going to be good. Now, that said, though, Xavier Williams really does look like a stud. He had 11 rushes, 122 yards, and a tutty. We'll see if he's able to replicate that against a much better opponent this weekend against Iowa State. That remains to be seen. And I don't know, honestly. And, we usually play them pretty close. I think he will play well. But, it's just I don't know how balanced we're going to be, because we only had 48 passing yards in the whole game against Albany, against an FCS school. And you would think, did they just play really good defense? No, we just really didn't throw it too much. And Mark Gronowski, now he's the South Dakota State transfer, and he's won over 50 games at the FCS level, so he's got a lot of experience, and he was great at rushing the ball, throwing the ball, like that type of thing. Iowa ends up spending $2 million to bring him in, so I really would have thought they would have been more experimental with his play style instead of running him into the ground. And he had fallen down like a few times and had to step out of the game like twice. And it's like, why are we torturing the guy that we just brought in? And it's week one. And that's what I was confused about, because it is week one. And even though I get you want to see, and this maybe it's what he wanted to do, but there were a lot of design runs as well, and a lot of decisions where he just kept taking hits, and it's like, man, that's the future of our team. Like, we need him against games like Iowa State. We need him for Penn State, Oregon, Indiana, and any games in the future. We had spent $2 million to bring him in. We need him, so why are we rushing him into the ground? That's what I didn't understand. Now, overall, he was 8 for 15, 44 yards and a touchdown. The touchdown did surprise me. They went for it on 4th and goal, and it was a pretty solid throw. He probably should have had another one, but it was unclear whether it got tipped slightly or if he just kind of threw it into the dirt while he was throwing on the run, but he did have someone open, I remember. But once again, it's week one. So stuff like that is to be expected. Growing pains is to be expected. He just transferred over last year. He's been at South Dakota State his whole college tandem, so I get it. But I don't know. And, on the ground, Mark Gronowski had 11 carries, 39 yards, and a touchdown as well, but it really wasn't worth it. And it's not that quality of an opponent to be risking his health like this, especially so constant. And maybe that's a little exaggerated or under-exaggerated, because some of the carries, like, that doesn't really tell the whole story, where there were a lot of them where he either, like, got stopped behind the line and it was a sack, or, those types of things, where he just took big hits, where even if he got yardage, like, I remember a specific instance when it was 3rd and 18, he was rolling out, no one was open, and instead of, like, throwing it out of bounds or just stepping out of bounds, he ended up cutting back in. He got 4 yards and just got drilled by a guy for no reason. And even later in the game, when he scored that rushing touchdown, which I was very hyped about that one. I was barely able to watch that at work. I was watching it during my break. Very grateful that it timed up perfectly so I could see that. And then he ended up falling to the ground right after. I'm like, no, like, this is week 1. What happened? And we're hoping that it was just cramps, and then he stepped out of the game. But then he came back in on a drive or two later, and I was like, well, if it really isn't this serious, we should take him out of the game while it isn't. Because if you watch that game, the game was kind of already in hand. And I know Iowa kind of has this history of taking their foot off the gas too early and letting teams back in. I really thought that, we should take better care of our QB, and I don't know why we're forcing him to go back out there, because then he ended up going down again. And then it's like, man, we play Iowa State next week, and in this point, just a few days. So, I mean, very upsetting. And Mark Gronowski, honestly, I think the running backs are great, the defense is great, and I think Mark Gronowski is only going to get better. He's got all the experience to be able to do it, I would hope, and with all the money they spent, you'd think that he would do really well here, and I think he will. But I was expecting a little more in the passing game. I think that's my biggest thing. And it is his first game in this offense, but when you think about it, he's been playing at the FCS level, right? So it's fitting that his first game at Iowa is against an FCS team, but then you get all the Power 5 tools. You'd think that would somewhat elevate your game beyond what you had already done, despite possible growing pains and getting used to the team, because I'd understand if it was, a Power 4 team or whatever it is. But this is an FCS school. No shade at Albany, obviously, but, I mean, it's just tough for FCS schools out there because they don't have the same type of resources that a school like Iowa does. Iowa doesn't have the same type of resources that a team like Penn State does. Penn State to Ohio State, it's kind of like a Russian doll. That's kind of how college football is. And it really is about the money and resources at a certain point. So, I mean, Iowa certainly built a great team using those types of resources and did more than enough to win this game. They ended up winning 34-7. I don't know if I mentioned that. And it's great to start the season with a win. And I know it wasn't a super great quality non-conference opponent, but you know what? I understand it because you're not trying to test your QB. You just brought him in. You're trying to figure out the running back. You're trying to situate the defense because we got Iowa State next week. There's no reason to schedule a top team or like a power conference, like anything like that. There's no reason to do that. Not this early because we need to prepare. And we definitely can't be looking in shambles and then have Iowa State on the horizon the very next week. So I do get that. But I had thought that we were going to not only throw the ball more because of Gronowski, but just in general, I thought we were going to play better. And yes, we won 34-7, but that really doesn't tell the whole story. I mean, we scored 17 points in the second half. Like, that first half was like 7-7. Like, it was like very tied, and then 10. And then eventually we ended up pulling away, sure, but like it should have never been in question. And also, I mean, I really just wish we would have thrown it more. Not only because I'm itching to see Iowa have that type of dynamic offense, but also, I mean, I'm really looking forward to Mark Gronowski, and I was really excited all offseason to see this because we've kind of had this notion at Iowa where it's like, man, we're like that elite quarterback away from basically a playoff run. Because if the defense is great and we have a quarterback that can handle the offense, then all of a sudden we're scary because no one wants to play the Iowa defense ever, right? And even when Iowa has played good teams with horrendous offenses, they've still kept it close. Like, I remember a few years ago, they were playing Penn State, and Penn State was far better. Cade McNamara got injured in the first quarter, but even he hadn't been playing that great, but he was probably playing with another injury, I believe. But, I mean, at halftime, it was 10-0. That was it. Iowa was able to keep their team in games, and mainly that defense. So when it comes to Iowa, if their offense can just take advantage of those opportunities that the defense gives them, then they're really going to have a great future this season. And it really all starts with Iowa State. And this is certainly, it's not their biggest in terms of ranking, but in terms of what this means for the state, for the players, for the coaching staff, all the momentum that comes off of this, just everything, everything that comes out of this game, it probably is the most important on their schedule. And Iowa State, of course, is a great team. They're 16th ranked in the country. They went to Ireland and beat a 17th ranked Kansas State team, which maybe isn't as good as we thought. So maybe that gives Iowa a little more hope, because Kansas State kind of fell off the rocker the week after. Still won, but it wasn't a quality opponent, and they barely won. I think it was an FCS school as well. So it's man, that maybe that's not even a quality win anymore. But Iowa State won by 3. Still huge that they did that, because that was obviously on a soccer field and conditions weren't great, and they went out there and did it. And there's a big notion in just all football levels where if you're the better team, show it on the field. You need to prove it. You need to go out there and win. And so far, Iowa State has done that. They're one of the only 2-0 teams in the country because they played in week 0. And, of course, the highly anticipated Farmageddon in Ireland, where they beat Kansas State. And then last week's game, where they just dominated South Dakota, 55-7. And it wasn't like Iowa at Albany, where it was kind of close for a minute. But Iowa State just came out swinging, and that was never in question. And their quarterback, Rocco Becht, is looking really good. Now, it's a little inflated because they've played 2 games, but right now Rocco Becht is, if the season were to end today, the Heisman would probably go to Rocco Becht. But that ends up being purely because he played in week 0, but still. He's still been a great quarterback. And I know it's kind of tough to compare because Iowa State already had that big test and then came off of that game with so much confidence that they just flattened South Dakota. So maybe that same thing would have happened had Iowa had the same thing, but I don't know. And that Albany game, it worries me, because this was supposed to be not a test, but like a practice for this team to really try to figure things out. And especially because Iowa State is now. That's tomorrow. It's we really needed this game to really start figuring things out. And even though I think we did, I think we certainly could have used it better. And because we're certainly going to have to throw against Iowa State, maybe we don't want to, but in late game situations, because this game is always close, so I would assume it would be, just because that's kind of how we do it against Iowa State. So I think it will be close. And there's going to be a bunch of random coincidences that do happen to maybe either keep it close or to end up ending the game. And Iowa, I'm really worried, because I'm worried that Iowa's going to be in a position where they need to throw, and the things aren't just clicking, or someone runs the wrong route, or miscommunication because we didn't work on it enough when we had a real game practice. That's what I'm really worried about. Now, could that happen? Maybe it doesn't. I'm hoping it doesn't. We'll see how it ends up playing out. And the Iowa Hawkeyes, we're certainly a solid team, not ranked. Some people had us ranked, and if we win this game, probably will be. I was hoping that maybe we would be, just by some sheer luck, because we had been had some votes in the past during this year. I'd saw a lot of people have us at number 22 or number 24, or just hanging on the outside. I'm man, it would have been cool to have a ranked Cy-Hawk matchup, but nonetheless, this is still very interesting, and I kind of like that, because Iowa, I like the fact that we have that chip on our shoulder, that we see that number against Iowa State and treat it like a target, because I feel like that's what Iowa State consistently does to us, where you look at last year, they see that number on our backs, and especially, or not our backs, next to our logo in all the press for the game. And honestly, I think it's good that Iowa has their chip on that shoulder, because it feels like every time we're ranked sort of like that earlier in the year, we end up getting embarrassed or kind of exposed, like Iowa State or Penn State a few years ago, where it's I like that we have that chip on our shoulder. And I'm really interested in this game. And the schedule from here on out gets a little easier, because Iowa State is certainly a huge test, but then we get UMass at home. Now, I think that's probably a win. And then you look at going onto the road at Rutgers. I think we take care of business there, but then this is the big one. Hosting Indiana. And Indiana is now ranked 23 in the country. Now, they are starting to look more and more of a shell of themselves from last year, but even last year, Their schedule was not very difficult, and they only lost to Ohio State and Notre Dame, their biggest games where they mainly got exposed, so who knows how great they were that year. I still think they deserve to be in the playoffs for everything they did that year, and this is certainly going to be an interesting game. But the big thing is we get them at Kinnick. We get them at Niall Kinnick Stadium, and I don't know. I'm going to be at that game, hopefully, and I think we're going to I would hope we would win. And if we win against Iowa State, I think we go into that game 4-0. I do. So maybe that confidence, I don't know. And then we play Wisconsin on the road. Now, I would think we would beat Wisconsin against Luke Fickell's squad, but then on the road, that's going to be so tough. And then we do host number 2 Penn State. That's rough. We host number 2 Penn State and number 6 Oregon. Now, it would be interesting if we were able to split that. I hope we split those games, because if we don't, we're in big trouble. Because if we drop to Oregon and Penn State, and we're talking about how we might use to Indiana, and we have Iowa State on the road, when you start to look at it from a glance like that, it starts to get a little sketchy, but then the schedule gets a lot easier outside of those games. We have Minnesota at home, and then, of course, hosting Oregon, but then USC on the road. USC might bounce back. Them and Washington look like they're on the rise after they kind of fell down in their first year in the Big Ten. And then hosting Michigan State, I think we take care of business. And then on the road against Nebraska. Nebraska, of course, had that close win against Cincinnati. I don't know. That Nebraska game is just so weird. It feels like it's always so close and disgusting. And it feels like it really is like that every year against Nebraska. And it's kind of like Iowa State, just a bunch of random things happen. Like I remember a few years ago, there was like a corner route that Nebraska was running. And the guy ran inside when he was supposed to run outside. So then the ball was in the wrong spot, and they called intentional grounding on him, and that's how we won the game. And it was kind of like, oh, like that didn't feel good at all. I'm like, and it really did look like it was just a miscommunication that he was supposed to go out and he went in. Was it on purpose? Maybe, but it felt like that. You don't want to win that way, even if that was what happened. That's not how you want to win. And then, I mean, Iowa, it's so ridiculous because I remember last year or so, Drew Stevens had missed a kick or two. I think he had missed 2 kicks in that game. It was a rough game for him. And then, gosh, well, this is bringing back memories now because it was Chubba Purdy where we threw a pick, and then they immediately throw a pick back. And that's not even that. It gets worse though, because on our pick they had a huge return but had a penalty on it, brought it all the way back to almost beyond the 50, and then they throw it right to one of our defensive guys. And we were basically in field position when we caught it. We hardly had to move. And then we just, at the last second, throw in a backup kicker and just, sideline Drew Stevens because he was having a rough game. And this guy that hadn't kicked a ball, pretty much all year comes in and wins the game. It's like that Nebraska game's so weird. Iowa State's so weird. And there's so many great rivalries on this, and I'm kind of upset we don't play Purdue because I was looking forward to destroying them. Not a huge Purdue guy, even though I'm primarily from Indiana. It's hard. Some of these rivalry games, especially, and I'm trying to stop doing that with all the grudges I have against some of these teams. But I don't know, something about them I just can't, And especially teams like Iowa State and Nebraska are always so huge and always so weird. And honestly, let's get into the head-to-head matchups though. Matt Campbell versus Kirk Ferentz. I do think Kirk Ferentz is probably the better head coach. He's been in the game longer, but everything that Matt Campbell's done, they're kind of like the hot new squad. They got he hasn't been in the league as long as Kirk Ferentz, but they're definitely the more complete team. And the way he's been coaching them, the way he has such control over the whole team, the way his quarterback is playing, they're really firing on all cylinders. I think you give it to Kirk Ferentz still because of the experience and everything he's done and how great of a coach he has been in the past. But I think we could certainly see that start to get closer because Matt Campbell is really doing great things at Iowa State. Now, Rocco Becht against Mark Gronowski. Now, this is a tough thing to evaluate because Rocco Becht has already played a few years at Iowa State. Mark Gronowski, that was his first game. So it was ugly against Albany, but that was his first game with the team. And I know he's had a lot of experience, but it's tough with getting chemistry with your players, so I can get that. And Rocco Becht just looks really solid. So I feel like we do give it to Rocco Becht, but I'm not counting out Mark Gronowski yet because I don't think we've given him a proper chance yet. And I really hope he's able to play because there were some speculations, especially after all the times that he had fallen down with presumed injuries last game. Now, Iowa, of course, overall leads the series, but since they started winning them, all of a sudden it's been very even, and it's kind of 2-2 in this decade since 2020. And Iowa State is certainly the better team coming into this. They are ranked, obviously, and ranked quite highly, deservingly, I think, with their number 16 ranking. And Iowa's not ranked yet. If they don't win this game, there's a certain argument to be made that we won't be ranked at all, because I don't know if we go into Indiana with that type of confidence that we need to, or not go into them, but host Indiana. And I don't know if we win that game and then hosting Penn State and Oregon, if we drop these games like flies, I don't think they're going to be super forgiving to us when it comes ranking time. So I think this game is a must-win if we want to be in the AP poll. And just really, it kind of turns into a must-win if we want a college football playoff berth. And Iowa State is definitely seeing the same thing, because when you look at the Big 12, they're so on the same level on a lot of those teams. Now, I do think Iowa State's the best, and I know Arizona State's there. It's pretty much going to be between them, I think, but I've been really confident about Iowa State. I've said this all year. I even predicted that they would beat Kansas State, which they weren't supposed to do. I've been very high on Iowa State. And I've been saying it before they were top 20, and I'll keep saying it. But that's a good team. And honestly, the schedule, it's not as bad as it looks at first. Because when it looks like it's scary, you're just like number 2 Penn State, number 6 Oregon, number 23 Indiana, right? And those are the only ranked matchups after Iowa State. But we do get all those at home, and we have several winnable games. But when it comes to playoff time, 3 losses I don't think is going to cut it. And if we want to sneak in there, I think we do have to win this game. So it almost becomes a must-win for that sake. So unfortunately, it might be. And, I mean, what a game for that type of atmosphere, the Cy-Hawk game. And I hope the players realize that as well and know that going into it and just have that chip on their shoulder of not being ranked. Oh, Iowa State has that number. Let's take it from them. That type of thing. And honestly, I think Iowa could definitely come out hungry, because Iowa State has historically been the hungry team in this matchup, but it's not. Iowa State is defending the trophy. Iowa State hasn't won defending the trophy in a while. So I think Iowa is prime for a chance to steal this trophy. Now, while I do think Iowa State's the better team, I can certainly see Iowa going in there and stealing it, because I think Iowa is still a good team. And even though Iowa State's a good team as well, when we get into these games, especially Iowa State, it ends up basically being a coin flip. That's kind of what it is. And so I'm really excited for this game, and I think Iowa has the ability to go in there and steal one out of Ames. This is the Ben Buzz starring Benny King, and thanks for tuning into the first ever episode of Hawkeye State of Mind. I'll make sure to do another one as well, recapping this game. And honestly, what a weekend we have of college football overall, but Iowa State on Saturday at 12 Eastern Central Time. Make sure to tune in. It's going to be a great game. And thanks for listening to Hawkeye State of Mind.